Okay, we're going to take now a look at some of the different elements that are important for making a good composition. So we'll set up a new camera in here and we'll talk all about what makes a composition good versus bad, and we'll experiment a little bit with making our own good composition. So let's just copy this camera. I'm going to put it over here in the corner and then look through it. And then we're going to just look over towards the living room, I guess, of our house. Okay, and we're going to kind of come up more to eye level. I want to get the kind of the main shot here. So we're going to pull out quite a bit. But we're going to experiment with the different things that kind of come into play with compositions, and we're going to experiment with them, see what different things can do, and then just talk about some of the principles that make a composition good. So this shot's going to be more of an overall shot, trying to get more of the scene. So you can see right now it's looking okay. It's kind of weird that it's cut off up here. It's obviously weird that we have these lines not going straight up and down. That's an easy fix. If we go to select camera and go to tilt shift area, we can do the automatic vertical tilt, and that makes them go straight up and down. You can also do a vertical shift here. Let's keep that on, to go up and down with your camera so we can see up higher, which is pretty good. This just goes up and down, keeps the camera in the same spot, but does what's called a shift on the lens. Okay, so that composition is not bad. One thing that would change it is going into our render settings and changing our aspect ratio. So when I was experimenting before, I was using a square aspect ratio here. So let's try that. Need that off. We'll say 1500 for both. Okay, now you can see that we're getting more of the scene and maybe too much floor now, right? Maybe we could be zoomed in more, or maybe we don't want exactly a square because now we're getting too much floor and too much ceiling, but we are getting the full window in, which I think is nice. We can zoom the camera in like this. Whoops, went beyond our target. But now we're getting a little crowded on the sides. These couches are coming right to the edges, which is strange. We're getting some kind of distortion on the perspectives here. One thing that you'll notice when you're playing around with cameras is that if you're zoomed out, or if you move the camera out and then zoom in with the zoom angle, you get less distortion in your perspectives. So focal length right now is 27, which is pretty low. As you zoom in more, you can see that the distortion goes down. On the other hand, if we were way in here with the camera and we had to zoom out, now we get something more dramatic where our perspective lines are very, they're converging right here, not very far away. Whereas if we came out with the camera quite a bit and then adjusted the focal length, now our perspective angles are converging somewhere way off the screen, right? So you get less dramatic angles that way. And it's very easy to overdo that if you're, trying to get a dynamic angle to zoom way out with your camera. It's very easy to overdo that. That's not super realistic because most cameras aren't going to be using such a wide angle lens. So for architectural scenes, usually in the range of 27 millimeter focal length or above. That's just a general rule of thumb though. It's not a hard and fast rule. So the other thing to consider, we would kind of need to render. I think we want to open up this. I mean, this looks pretty good here. I actually like it more like this, but we need to open up the sides a little bit. So I want to change not to a perfect square, but maybe something more like this. Okay, so that aspect ratio, and then pull out a little bit with the camera. And then we can tilt up, I think. using our shift. And maybe move our point of view slightly to the left. Okay, so just composing based on shapes that I see, this looks okay. Maybe this is a little empty over here, but what we can do is add some other entourage in and kind of stage our scene a little bit. But I think the general, so this wall over here needs to kind of be balanced over here possibly. So we could do a tree outside to make it visually more balanced. We could add a lamp inside. We could do a lot of different things to make that work. But I like the lines that I'm getting here and the lines that I'm getting here. And it's showing kind of the things that I want it to show. Perhaps we could come out slightly, zoom out slightly, let's say. Okay, I'm okay with that too. And then maybe move slightly like this. There we go, that's pretty good. Now we're getting more balance here. We're seeing this post here and this wall here. And then we'll see this big window. Now, the other thing that's gonna come into play with composition, we've looked at the aspect ratio, the camera settings, zoom versus position of the camera. The other thing that'll come into play is, right now we're getting the lines and the shapes and the forms, but what we're not seeing is light versus dark areas. Like this window is gonna be looking outside, so it'll be much lighter, right? So all this around it, we want to kind of be darker and maybe frame in this whole center area. But we need to think about the weight of the scene. So parts that appear heavier versus lighter, or darker versus lighter. So that's two different things. It's like weight versus light. We need to look at both of those things. And we need to look at what shapes are created by those different weights or those different light levels in our scene. Okay, so that's something we'll look at more as we actually render this. And then we can look at using Cosmos and other elements, other entourage to bring in to kind of stage our scene, but also to balance out the composition in a pleasing way. So in the next video, let's do a render of this, and then we'll talk about what improvements we can make.